Today we're going to talk about the final debate between Trump and Biden, along with the conspiracy theory that might have blown it for Trump. I'm also going to touch on some promising early voting signs and a warning about those same numbers. And I speak with Beto O'Rourke about the massively important work he's doing to finally flip Texas blue. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. Let's start off with the final debate. This came after a first debate where Trump's strategy was apparently to prove to the American people that he is a lunatic relative to Joe Biden, and a second debate that Trump bailed on, only to hold a town hall where his strategy was, again, to prove to the American people that he's a lunatic relative to the moderator. And so clearly, Trump had one strategy here in this final debate, which was to show that he was capable of being calm. And that's not because he's a benevolent person, it's because he was basically held hostage against the threat that the moderator, Kristen Welker, had a mute button. Because in Trump's desperation to look strong, you would not be able to find worse optics than Trump screaming silently on stage. And just the fact that we needed a mute button for a 74-year-old, full-grown man with the nuclear codes pretty much sums up this presidency. Now, in terms of what we actually saw at the debate, here's what it boils down to. This wasn't a debate on their different philosophies, it was a debate on their different set of facts. Donald Trump and Joe Biden do not live in the same universes, and that was on full display. Biden spoke about issues facing the American people. He spoke about a concrete plan for getting this virus under control, a virus that Trump has not only allowed to spread uninhibited for 8 months, but that's spiking to its worst point ever now. The US just reported its highest number of coronavirus infections in one day since the beginning of this pandemic, proving that Trump has no plan and it is getting worse by the day. Biden spoke about transitioning to renewables, wind and solar, which are the fastest growing sectors in this country. And he admitted his goal of eventually transitioning away from oil. And I know that Republicans thought this was some huge concession, but it was smart. How many voters out there have a litmus test of voting in lockstep with ExxonMobil? Especially considering from a jobs perspective, relying on fossil fuels is completely counterintuitive. It is a dying industry, not a burgeoning one. And by the way, Biden also spoke about the disparate impacts on communities of color who live near oil refineries and chemical plants that are making them sick. He gave a detailed answer about fence-line communities and proved that he's not only familiar with the concept of environmental justice, but that he's taking it seriously. And finally, Biden reiterated on numerous occasions that he'll be a president not just for blue states, but for all states. And look, for however hokey this might sound to people, for a lot of others out there who are sick and tired of the division and pitting half of the country against the other, this was what they needed to hear. I'm sure there are people in red states who have family in blue states that maybe don't want disaster relief withheld from their loved ones after a wildfire or a hurricane. Maybe you don't even need to have family to just be able to believe that a president shouldn't play favorites with Americans' lives depending on the electoral benefit of their states. Either way, Biden spoke to those people. Meanwhile, Trump spoke about, Hunter Biden's email scandal? Where Hunter Biden apparently dropped off a laptop brimming with incriminating emails to a shop in Delaware while living in California, to the owner who was an avowed Trump supporter, but we can't confirm anything because the security camera footage was miraculously wiped. But the shop owner swears it was Hunter, even though he is legally blind. And the story was written by a former producer for Sean Hannity and sourced by Rudy Giuliani, who was the target of a Russian disinformation campaign. The story was so flimsy that even Fox News refused to run it. That's what Donald Trump included in his final pitch to voters. That story. He said he was the best president for black people, except maybe with the exception of Abraham Lincoln. Donald Trump, the guy who has white supremacists literally marching in the streets for him. The guy who called for the executions of the Central Park Five, who were exonerated by DNA evidence. The guy who began his campaign on the promise of building a wall to keep Mexicans out and ban Muslims from entering the country. The guy who refused to disavow the endorsement of the KKK's David Duke. The guy who attacked black athletes for peacefully kneeling to protest police brutality. Yeah, Donald Trump, just a regular Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke about Ukraine and Burisma and China and the deep state. The point is that while Biden was focused on issues that actually impact Americans, Trump was living in this Judge Jeanine Fox News fever dream. This was his final pitch to the American people, his last chance to appeal to an electorate that, judging by the polls, are not supporting him. And he used that opportunity to wail about Burisma? I don't even think it's so much a matter of him purposefully trying to make this into a major issue. I think that him living in this insulated right-wing ecosystem has convinced him that it already is a major issue. He thinks that everyone is down the same conspiratorial QAnon rabbit hole that he went down, but they're not. Think about how dangerous it is to have a president that lives in this separate plane of reality. Americans are dying from coronavirus. They're looking for jobs and wondering how they're going to pay their mortgage or not get evicted from their apartments. They're trying to juggle their kids being home from school with trying to work. And the fact that Donald Trump is screeching about the deep state is all the proof you need that today's GOP is so woefully, dangerously out of touch with the American people. This man and the party that backs him are not looking out for your best interest. Their only focus is on Hunter Biden and Hillary Clinton and jailing political opponents and taking marching orders from a compromised Rudy Giuliani. It is a circus, and everyone wants out of the tent. What's crazy is that these measures that Trump is leaning on to pull off an upset victory are what is ultimately turning people away. It is having exactly the reverse effect. If the point is that people are voting on some serious issues like this pandemic or the jobs or the economy, all of which are as tenuous as they've been in a generation, then spouting off about conspiracy theories just proves that you are not capable of empathizing with people. Every day Trump spends screeching about Hunter Biden's laptop is an in-kind contribution to Joe Biden and a message to the American people that he just doesn't get it and he's never gonna get it. We don't live in the same world as the President of the United States, which means that he won't be able to solve any of our problems here either. Next, I want to talk about early voting. We are seeing record early voting across the country. As of Sunday, October 25th, we're seeing a 500% increase for 18 to 29-year-olds in Florida, a 700% increase in North Carolina, a 2,000% increase in Michigan. Across the U.S., early voting for 18 to 29-year-olds is up 31% so far compared to 2016. More broadly, about 60 million Americans have voted so far, which is about half as many voters as there were in all of 2016, and we still have more than a week to go until Election Day. Voters have been waiting as long as 11 hours in line to vote. Speaking personally, my mom has never voted in over 60 years, and if you thought I should have been able to convince her, you do not know the stubbornness of a Jew from Brooklyn. She just voted for the first time in her life for Joe Biden and Democrats straight down the ballot. And we're hearing stories like this everywhere. First-time voters in their 70s, 80s, 90s. I just saw a picture of a 106-year-old woman dropping off her mail ballot in full PPE. And that's in addition to those 18-year-olds defying the odds and turning out in what we hope will be record-breaking numbers for young people too. What this tells us is twofold. One, there is clearly massive enthusiasm for this election, and rightfully so, because democracy is at stake, our planet is at stake, our lives are at stake. I don't think I have to explain why this election is so important. I will, but I don't think I necessarily have to. But second, and more importantly, is that while we see numbers like these with demographic groups that are favorable to Democrats or a higher number of mail-in ballots received by Democrats than Republicans, do not let any of these early voting advantages make you complacent. You can take some fleeting momentary joy in them, sure, but just know that Republicans are going to turn out on Election Day in numbers that have historically won them elections. That was always their plan. Trump has been grooming his supporters specifically to avoid requesting mail ballots. He wants them in line on November 3rd. These gaps will close, so do not let up. Do not sit back and relax, and definitely don't get complacent because we've seen this movie before and it didn't end well. So the same calls to action remain. It's you plus a friend, you plus a family member, you plus a neighbor, you plus a coworker. Find someone who didn't vote in 2016 to vote for Biden. Find someone who voted for Trump in 2016 to switch to Biden. In Michigan, the winning margin averaged out to 2 votes per precinct. 2. Those are the margins that we need to overcome. You don't need a podcast to make a difference. You just need 2 people. 2 people to flip a precinct, which will flip a state, which will flip an election. That's how much power you have, so use it. Some final notes. I'm doing live chats every day on Instagram if I can, so follow me at Brian Tyler Cohen to watch. Visit votesaveamerica.com to find out whether you're able to vote early, when early voting starts and ends, when you can go vote, and where you can drop off your ballot safely. It is the best tool there is, so take advantage. I'll include a link in the post description. And finally, to watch my interview with Beto O'Rourke, check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. We're a week out. What else can I say other than to get out there and vote? That's it for this week. Talk to you next time.